Welcome back everyone, I'm Captchz, and today I'm going to be doing another review, reaction, and comparison video for Ms. Marvel Episode 3. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you've been watching the TV show, it is getting a lot better, and we're getting a lot more of the background of where Kamala actually finds her powers, which is pretty cool. It doesn't compare too much to the comic book, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw in some panels that I think were actually from the comic books that they implemented into the show. But I'm also going to show a little bit more of Cameron and how he is in the comics once we get to that point in the section. Do want to say before we start, I appreciate all the views that I've been getting. It really helps out my channel, and just seeing the views on my account and seeing that X amount of people have seen it, it really makes me kind of feel good that people are actually watching this and possibly watching the whole video. So if you guys can, please go ahead and subscribe, like, comment, and share. Please subscribe if you haven't already. That'll really help me out and kind of give you the notifications of anything that I post that's recent. And you can also see all my other videos that I have posted in the past. So let's go ahead and dive into this episode. So we do get a little bit more background of how the bracelet came to be, and actually Kamala's great grandmother Aisha, her great grandmother was the one that had essentially found the bracelet in the past, as we see in the beginning of the episode. And that sort of correlates to the comics, but that's going to be like the 2015 to 2019 series. We get a little bit of background of Aisha in there, and it doesn't really obviously talk about a bracelet because in the comics we all know Kamala got her powers from the Terrigen Mist that came to Jersey City. So there's a little bit of a panel that is in the later issues that kind of goes over Aisha and her travels, going away from pretty much where they lived. From there, the bracelet is actually attached to a blue hand. So a lot of people are thinking that it could be a Kree that actually possessed this bracelet beforehand, and the Kree already have their own powers and abilities, but maybe this bracelet enhanced one of them, so there goes that. We don't really see much of that in the comics, at least from 2014 to 2019. We don't really see much of any background correlating to the Kree and everything like that. So while Nakia is trying to be on the board of the mosque, they get interrupted actually by Damage Control. So Damage Control enters the mosque without any warrant or anything like that, and so she kind of defends the mosque by telling them they're not allowed to do any searches without a warrant. And she later ends up going to see Kamala, okay? And with Kamala in her room and going through her own stuff, Nakia comes in her room and is just like throwing all of her feelings towards Kamala, and Kamala's really not paying attention. But she actually sees Kamala looking at videos of pretty much herself, Ms. Marvel, saving the kid from the tower that one night. And Nakia's kind of like upset at Ms. Marvel, or this superhero that they've Nightlight is what they call Kamala in the beginning, which is not going to stick, obviously. But yeah, so Nakia kind of gets a little bit mad, and she's upset with them. And this girl that's bringing all this bad, how do I say, like this bad look on Kamala and Nakia's like people, religion, things like that, being Muslim and everything like that. So she thinks that like it's kind of a bad thing of this superhero person in the city, and Kamala then feels kind of awkward and doesn't express to her that she's actually Ms. Marvel. But if you've watched the show, then at the end of the episode, Nakia does finally find out that Kamala is Ms. Marvel, or this Nightlight superhero. So, also later in the episode, we actually get to see Amir's wedding, and while they're having kind of like a wedding party at Kamala's house, she ends up going outside and she's like contemplating her thoughts of, did I do a good thing that night? I almost messed up, I almost didn't save that kid. And she ends up talking to Abdullah, which is the mosque like priest pretty much, that gives all of the sermons and prayers and things like that. And they're actually talking, and that's very similar to the comics because Kamala does actually talk to him in the comics, and she's asking him like, well, I try to do good and I'm not trying to cause any harm, but I always tend to mess up, and and sometimes it doesn't look like I'm doing the right thing even though that I'm trying. So they kind of have that conversation, and he says if you want to do pretty much good things, then you got to do good by yourself first, and learn to be who you are, and just try to do things better for the most part, like think of the whole situation. So that's kind of similar to the comics as far as her and him talking. So like I said, I like how they bring some stuff from the comics into the show, but it's all like jumbled, which is totally fine with me. I've read the 2014 to 2015 series. I read the second series, 2015 to 2019. I'm currently reading everything beyond that as well with Miss Marvel, but everything seems to be within the 2014 to 2015 years, right around there. So they bring a lot of stuff that's, like I said, from the later comics into the TV show, which is really dope. So the biggest portion of this episode for me was Cameron, and what he plays in the MCU version, the Disney Plus series, is so totally different from how it is in the comics. So if you haven't read the comics, Cameron actually has powers just like Kamala. He gets affected by the Terrigen Mist. Actually, a lot of people in Jersey City got affected by the Terrigen Mist, so they all have these different types of powers. So Cameron actually has powers. So I'm not sure if they're going to show any of that in the series. I don't think they are, just because, like I said, he's totally different in the comic books. But in the comic books, we think that Cameron's nice at the end of episode 2, beginning of episode 3. But then later to find out that his mom just wants the bracelet to pretty much go back to their own time. So Cameron's mom and her posse, for the most part, is from a different dimension, which is kind of weird to bring out into a Disney Plus show, because it's going to leave a bunch of open questions unless they bring something to the table in the next 3 episodes. We've already seen somebody who can travel to different dimensions, and that's obviously America Chavez. So if you've seen the multiverse, she can travel through dimensions. And the MCU is pretty much expanding little by little of the multiverse. And I was actually rewatching Spider-Man Far From Home, and that's where I think multiverse kind of was brought into the MCU. I think there was another comic where they didn't really specify the word multiverse, but they hints that there might be other dimensions or universes that we can travel to. But back to Cameron and his position, pretty much. So he's actually born on Earth, but for the most part, his mom and her posse are from a different dimension. So they're trying to get the bracelet back, and they're trying to take it from Kamala. I don't understand yet why they want it or what they actually really want it for. I feel like there's a little bit deeper meaning there. But flip side to the comic is when Cameron is first introduced, he seems totally nice, like he usually did in the Disney Plus show. Totally nice, friendly, good looking, trying to get close to Kamala. But in the comics, he's just getting close to her to take to his boss for the most part. And I'll put a little panel up so you guys can see. So he's trying to take her out in his car, which is very similar to the comics. He's driving Kamala in the comics to a location, and she was like, "Oh, I thought you were taking me here," and he's like, "Oh, well, no, I'm gonna actually take you somewhere else. I need you to pretty much see something or meet with somebody." So she's already on the fence, and then she ends up meeting Cameron's boss, who is pretty much trying to form a team of these people that have been affected by the Terrigen Mist that have certain powers. But that doesn't end well. She ends up fighting Cameron and the boss, and there's somebody else there as well, a woman who has certain powers, and she pretty much fights them all off, and she's able to defeat Cameron for the most part in the comics, which is pretty nice. So after Kamala is finding out that Cameron wants the bracelet, she ends up talking to Bruno about it in the Disney Plus show. And he's pretty much saying that if she were to return the bracelet to the family, that there would be some type of dimensional explosion in their current dimension. That the powers are so powerful that if they use it to go back somewhere, it's going to affect them. So we may see something like that. I'm not too sure yet, but for the most part, Cameron and his mom and her posse are pretty much the villain that we see so far. There could be something else coming later in the show. I'm not really sure if they're actually going to bring it out, but like I mentioned in the last episode, her first big encounter to a villain is the Inventor, who is actually stealing kids and using them to pretty much power up they're pretty much taking their powers for the most part and using them to grow his strength. But like I said, I don't think we're going to see that in the show because there hasn't been any mention of anything like that yet or any missing people, but we got time. So if they return the bracelet, then that means there's going to be some type of deep dimension explosion that could affect their world. So Bruno's pretty much like, don't do it. But then Kamala's like, well, you said that there might be a chance. So, there might be a chance or there might not be a chance. It's 50-50. So Kamala is kind of leaning towards giving away the bracelet to them because Cameron's mother knows Aisha, which is Kamala's great-grandmother, and she says that she's trying to get back to their own time, right, their own dimension, so that she can fix everything or be back together with Aisha for the most part. After that, we do see Amir's wedding that happens, which is actually a really cool part of the episode, and it's pretty much towards the end. So we see that, and then we also do see that in the comics as well. And there is something that happens at the wedding in the comics, and Kamala does leave the wedding to go handle whatever's going on in the Jersey City as far as the neighborhood. So, like I said, Amir, right from the beginning of Disney Plus, was already engaged to his fiance, but in the comics, he doesn't actually get with his fiance until the 2016 year, so in the second issues of Miss Marvel. So that does happen in the comic books, and you'll be able to see some of that once I put up a panel. But from there, apparently Cameron was supposed to get Kamala to get the bracelet, and he is kind of feeling a little bit bad because he doesn't want her to get hurt, and he's feeling a little bit of empathy towards the whole matter. And at the end of all that, the mother actually goes to Amir's wedding, and that's where they have this big old giant fight scene. So during this fight scene, Kamala really hasn't used her powers to defend herself, and with a lot of these Marvel movies or superhero movies that we've seen is that sometimes they're able to use their power when they're feeling a pressure of survival for the most part. So Kamala's defending herself the best that she can. Like I said, she hasn't really trained much with her powers, only by having the hard light out there as using as steps or as shields, things like that. But she hasn't really used anything as far as weaponry or anything like that. So pretty much just all defensive. But in the comics, she actually fights quite a bit of people. Almost in every other issue, she's fighting somebody or using her powers and bigging herself to punch people, things like that. And she actually uses her hard light and a fist to actually punch one of the bad guys, like almost across the room, it seemed like, which was pretty cool. So we saw a little bit of that happening where she was able to enlarge her hand, stretch it out, and then punch him and then have him knocked out. Other than that, she's, like I said, she's just mainly using shielding. But there's this one part in the show where she actually gets hit like in the chest area, in the torso, and she falls down. But like, it reminded me a little bit of Black Panther, where the more he got hit in his suit, the more forceful of strength he has or power that he can release. So if you looked at that, it was kind of just like all over her chest area, and it almost seemed like it was going to form some type of suit or armor, which would be pretty cool, because I would love to see Kamala in an actual, superhero costume, like something, whether that just forms around her when she needs it, like it does in the comics, or, she has something made that's just a lot better. Shoot, maybe a hand-me-down from Captain Marvel, but I don't think they're the same size as far as like height and things like that. So you never know what could happen, but I kind of saw that and I was like, ooh, is that going to be like a suit that is able to form? So after all of this fighting, the damage control comes back in, and they actually capture Cameron's mom and her posse, and Kamala actually ends up able to escape from, I think, like the back or the front. I forget which one, but she runs into Bruno and Nakia. And Nakia then, at that point, finds out that Kamala is actually this masked hero, Miss Marvel or Nightlight, which is still so funny. So she ends up finding that out at that point, and so Kamala has to, run away to go find her family or go back to the house pretty much, and then Bruno's going to explain to Nakia pretty much what's happening with Kamala. So at the last point of the episode, we get a call from Nani, which is Kamala's grandmother, and she's like, Kamala, you have to come to Karachi. And she's like, I can't go, like mom's not gonna let me go. But she's like, no, you both need to come, like, didn't you see it, didn't you see the train? And so since the beginning of the episode, once Kamala got her powers, she's been having these like visions, and I'm not sure how they activate, but they activate by the bracelet. And Kamala and Cameron's mother actually, she touched the bracelet, and I believe they both saw this vision of a train, and in the front of the train it said Karachi. So in the comics, Kamala does go to Karachi, and she stays there for some time, I think maybe a month or less, I forget what the timeline is, but she does go there, and she actually meets another superhero. I don't think he has any superpowers, but his name is Red Dagger. And she actually meets up with him, and they do kind of help the city a little bit, or the town that they're in, with some like crime fighting stuff. So maybe we'll get to see Red Dagger in the next episode. Who knows? But other than that, I'm just going to do a few little more pointers, and then I'll get you guys out of here. Thanks. So that's pretty much the end of that episode. I think this is going to be a lot quicker video than the past two. But like I said, I'm still trying to get the hang of what to actually talk about, how to compare it. And pretty much just whatever the episode delivers, I'm going to be able to hopefully relate that to the comics. So I do have a few more panels out on this video. So hopefully you guys kind of see that little bit of contrast there, that comparison. But overall, episode 3 I thought was really enjoyable. And yes, this show may be centered towards more of a younger group, but like I said, if you're a fan of reading comics, I mean, comics is all ages. And, Miss Marvel, I started reading once I found out that she was going to get a TV show. I had no idea who she was. And then now she's, one of the heroes that I follow a lot or read up on, because the comic books are really easy to read. They're fun. They have a lot of excitement. They're a little bit packed with a lot of information, so sometimes it's good to kind of go back and read it again. But also, really enjoy the Young Avengers. I've read pretty much all of their series, which is really good. And you never know what could happen, actually. I mean, they may put Miss Marvel as a Young Avenger in substitute of, let's say, Ant-Man's daughter, Stature. You never know what could actually happen. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you got to see a little bit of the comic book side of how things have been going. And hopefully my explanation is simple enough. Hopefully you don't get too confused going back and forth from the Disney Plus to the comics, but hopefully these panels will help out. If you can, just one more time, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and just like, comment, and share this video, and hopefully you enjoy it, and I'll see you for episode 4.